Good morning, Scoop Nation. You are listening to the Morning Scoop. It is January 4th, 2023, and the first of many iterations probably to come in this offseason of just the absolute pain and heartbreak from myself and I know TJ as well over the Georgia loss from this past weekend in the college football playoff. Wasn't I can, and we talked a little bit ahead of this, TJ, but man, I don't know how I feel, whether it's just like pure heartbreak because it was so close, or if I'm just glad that they showed that they can compete with the Georgias of the world in this day and age of college football.
Yeah, I mean, that's really the tough thing. We knew that they would be able to compete going in there. We know that Ohio State has elite level talent. Georgia's the number one team in the country. They're the reigning national champions, so they have that going for them. But I don't think anybody expected Ohio State to go in there and, get pushed around, get bullied, get beat badly. It was just a matter of how we would kind of line up against some of their premier talent. We talked weeks leading up about, maybe having the best defensive tackle in the country, the great linebacker that they got, what Stetson brings to the table. As far as I saw it, one or two plays could have decided the outcome of that game. We were right there with them. Unfortunately, when you have close games like that, man, it'll haunt you. It'll haunt you for a while. It'll haunt you the entire off season. You're going to constantly think back to those key plays that if they would have went your direction if you could have found a way to just get it done, you're playing for a national championship.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, and as we'll get into with like some of those plays that you mentioned, like they did go our way. They did go Ohio State's way on the field, but then they get reversed or they get changed or, and I think there's some elements that I agree with, like the refs, like with the targeting. I don't actually think that was a targeting necessarily, but I do think it was a personal foul. So like just the taking away of the entire penalty altogether doesn't make sense to me. But man, I don't know. I mean, and it's tough to say like one of those goes our way, the rest of the game happens exactly the same way, or, the narrative stays the same in terms of like what Ohio State was doing, what Georgia was doing. Who knows what Kirby Smart changes if Marvin Harrison's still on the field, right? So I don't know. It's encouraging, like I said, to see. I think just the Ryan Day kind of answering some of the questions around him, CJ Stroud answering the questions around him. There's still a lot to work on, obviously, this offseason, but I think it was still at least promising to see the changes from what we saw in the Michigan game, at the very least.
Yeah, and really, when you look at the Marvin Harrison no call or reversal, the whole and I dropped it on one of our threads on the message board on BuckeyeScoop.com. If you haven't had a chance, go over there and check it out. But just some of the inconsistencies that we get with targeting calls, with a lot of different calls. I mean, I even mentioned on there about in regards to offensive linemen. We get a holding call a lot of times when they say you do a hip torque. There's just different things that if you're going to call it, be consistent with it. And if you're going to create new penalties to protect players, to protect their safety, then you've got to enforce that every time. Because what I saw was a guy that went to hit Marvin Harrison with malicious intent, right? There was nothing Marvin could do. He was defenseless to it as he went up for the ball. And that guy did what a guy like Jack Tatum would have done back in the day. Yeah. And that's the type of stuff that they've said they are trying to eliminate. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm from the age of football where I like the fact that you can hit people. I like the fact that you can hit a quarterback. I like the fact that, you can impose your will upon somebody and not have every little ticky-tack thing called. But that seemed like, and again, we talked about it before we jumped on here, that there's got to be some type of foul targeting. It's got to be a personal foul. I mean, there was
Yeah.
intent, there was vicious, violent, malicious intent.
Oop, I think I lost you there for a second.
There we are.
It's okay. We can edit that out. But yeah, malicious intent either way. I think you're right. Like I saw that more as like a hit on a defenseless player as opposed to a targeting necessarily, but that's part of targeting too. So, I don't know, by the letter of the law if it's kind of what we typically expect from a targeting, the way that the hit in, like, say, the Michigan game was. I think that was targeting. I think the hit in the Tulane game was targeting. But I mean, there's a lot of different ways to look at it, but I still think, like you said, that's a hit against a defenseless player. That's a play that they're trying to get out of the game altogether. I mean, especially, I mean, obviously in hindsight, but with like the Damar Hamlin stuff, and like even not being a malicious hit or anything that's egregious, there's a lot of risk at play just playing football in general. And if you're going to allow hits like that when a guy is just, making a play for the ball and trying to, I mean, can't really protect himself from somebody just coming full force, launching into him with a shoulder and eventually knocking him out of the game. I mean, credit to Ryan Day and staff for keeping him out. I mean, it's a huge game. Could we have used Marvin the rest of that game? Absolutely, but who knows what you do or what happens again if you put him back in the game just to even be a decoy at that point.
Yeah, I mean, you could tell
Yeah.
that hit took its toll. It took its effect. Um, mission accomplished. If
Mm.
you're the defensive back who went and laid the shot, I didn't see who it was that hit him. I can't remember if it was a linebacker or a defensive back. But again, they achieved what they set out to do, which was take Marvin Harrison out the game. And up to that point, Marvin Harrison showed exactly what he showed all year long, that he's the best wide receiver in the country, hands down. Again, shame that he was not
Yep.
the Blitnikoff Award winner. But that's another one that you kind of look back to again. And you mentioned Damar Hamlin. You know, some of the preparation things that we do nowadays, again, to protect, to highlight safety, player safety, consecutive 2 days. You don't have a ton of different um, drills that you do. So are guys really acclimated when they take that type of shot?
Hmm.
Was Damar Hamlin, was he acclimated for that type of shot? Just a young guy when Higgins kind of turned up and put his shoulder and helmet right into his chest area, right going up towards the neck. I mean, I just don't think guys are accustomed to taking those type of shots anymore. You can say whatever it is, but man, back in the day, you almost felt like when a guy would take a really serious hard shot like that, you would see him get up more than you do, because maybe his body
Hmm.
was a little bit more acclimated to it. But tell you what, man, Marvin Harrison is a tough kid. Glad we got him on our side, and he is the best wide receiver in the country. And I know that whatever shakes out here in the offseason going into spring ball, whoever gets under center or in shotgun, I would think that it would be Kyle McCord first. They're gonna have some serious weapons to work with.
Yeah, I mean, it is a luxury to still have another year of Marvin Harrison, assuming nothing like Jackson Smith and Jigba happens at the beginning of the year. Game one, have first, second series, whatever that happened in the Notre Dame game. But
Or
if
wait that he doesn't transfer to USC,
or
right?
yeah, or he doesn't transfer to go play with. But now I don't know. Caleb Williams might be transferring to Ohio State. I mean, all the conversations of, I don't know, just absurd, fan theories going on in the off season. But those will swirl, I'm sure, for a week or so and then fizzle out, and we'll be like, hey, we still got Marvin Harrison on our team. So, but the other one too, in another hit that obviously we lost Cade Stover on, which I didn't really think. I don't looking at the actual play in real time. I didn't think anything of it, but he leaps over defender, is somersaulting right in midair, and a Georgia linebacker coming across the field as he is upside down virtually, just goes directly into his knee, like in midair. And I looked at it and I was like, I mean, that's not like, it's unnecessary. He's going down. He's not going to get extra yardage or anything like that. If you don't hit him. It was just a weird play to me, and I think it happens probably more often than we realize in a game like that. But that was another one where I looked at and we lose Cade Stover on that exact hit, whether or not it was because of the fall or the actual hit, who knows? But it's an unnecessary hit either way.
Yeah, those are tough to see, and guys don't really wear the same type of padding that they used to anymore either. I mean, guys are going with just the stick inserts, and
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't. They used to look funny. Then we'd have those big bulky pads sticking out of our pants. But when you take a shot like that, when you go down to the ground, it's there for a reason. But I will mention just that the close losses, the 1-point losses, they're so hard to shake. And I always look back to comparing it to my career where we had and it was terrible to have to watch this. They had it on the NFL Network, the Football Life, about the 2005 Rose Bowl between USC and Texas, where they say it's maybe the greatest game ever played in college football. That Texas team beat in Horseshoe, and to think back and know that could have been us sitting in a driver's seat, because at the end of the season, we were the number 3 team in the country after beating Notre Dame. You constantly will look back at 2, 3, maybe 4 plays that if they go differently, it goes in your favor and you most likely win. But then you look at like a championship game in 2006 when we lost to Florida. Everything went wrong. So it's almost like you'd rather get blown out because everything just went to shit. But when you have those close ones, again, they'll stick with you, they'll bother you, and you'll think about it even when you're older. You're just kind of I mean, you can remember those certain people to this day and think, wow, just that, every yard is golden. Holding your block just a little bit longer, the field goal, a dropped pass. I know the feeling that these players are going through right now, and it sucks, but you've got to find a way to use it as motivation. You've got to use it to drive you through the off season, and understand that if you handle your business again the way you did this year, hopefully beating Michigan next year up in Ann Arbor, you'll be right back in the same position again, and don't let it happen again.
Yep. And it's painful for the players. It's painful for the fans. I know we've talked about it obviously in this first kind of segment here, but in order to I guess alleviate some of that pain, I'm going to go ahead and make this transition because it's just perfect for this. Go ahead and subscribe to BuckeyeScoop.com. Join in on all the conversations community and ease some of your pain this off season by talking with some of the fans, having that conversation, and looking forward to the 2023 season. Of course, as always, if you like this video, be sure to like the actual video on YouTube and subscribe to the YouTube channel so that you can stay up to date with all the most recent content coming out of Buckeye Scoop and all of us here. I know Kirk, CEO, Buckeye Scoop CEO Kirk Barton and the team do a lot of live streams these days. So keep on the lookout for all of those as well. So subscribe today and join BuckeyeScoop.com so that you can, like I said, alleviate some of the pain from this Georgia loss. But we talked a little bit about it with key plays and just kind of one of the things that I wanted to also just touch on was you mentioned it, like the close loss versus getting blown out. And like I look back to 2015, the Michigan State game, and like just the little things that go differently for one of what I would argue is one of the best Ohio State rosters, in recent memory. 2019, losing to Clemson in a close way and losing the way that we lost that game. Do I think we would have beaten LSU that year? Maybe not, but I think we would have stood a better chance than Clemson did in the championship game. But I put this out on my Twitter on Saturday night, I think Saturday or Sunday, after the game, and just said it seems like Ohio State's always right there. We're one of the few programs that, consistently, especially over the last 20, 30 years, has been in the conversation of national championship, and consistently is right there, but we don't seem to get over the hump. And we continue to watch teams like Alabama have their dynasty run, like Georgia now have their dynasty run. And we keep seeing these like, just ridiculous teams that are put together that seem to take that leap over us, but we're still right there. And I don't know what needs to happen in order to make that, because I feel like we should be on the verge of a dynasty every single year, and it just never materializes.
Yeah, you're right. And again, we look back at Clemson. I mean, that was another one of the things that I talked about on that thread on BuckeyeScoop.com yesterday. Some of those calls in that game, they still bother me. Where you've got the big 6'5" quarterback who is cowering down to take the shot, and all of a sudden it becomes a targeting. Well, it's almost like he worked himself right into it. I mean, there's, you think back, looked like the guy had caught the ball to me, turned up field and made a step or two, man. I think that probably should have been our ball, but they ruled it complete. So you're right. It's a really tough thing to wrap your mind around, because coming off of Urban, what Ryan Day kind of, I understand what Harbaugh said about, thinking you hit a triple and you're already on third base, whatnot, all that crap. But, Ryan Day inherited the keys to a program that was flying as high as anybody in the country. We're talking about a top 5 program, top 5 football team every year coming out of the starting blocks. But what does it take to get over the hump? Well, it all ultimately boils down to victory. How do you find a way to win these close, big games? And now you see a little bit of we've gone backwards. Michigan stuff. We've lost 2 in a row now. So it's almost like, wow, we've been in these college football playoff games, but we're also losing to our rivals. So there's some things that the coaching staff has to figure out. I think in any great organization, any great business, any great team, it starts with your leadership. It starts with the people at the top. It starts with the management, and that falls your head coach, your associate head coaches, your OC, your DC, finding a way to get it done.
Yep.
Coach Knowles in the defense couldn't find a way to get a stop against Georgia in the fourth quarter. All we needed was a stop. I don't know how you actually get this done, to be able to form that dynasty, other than just saying, find a way to win the close games.
Right.
And again, that is players that have a supreme focus, guys that are laser sharp, dialed in, guys that don't care as much about the money and opting out and the media attention and looking sweet and whatever it may comes with the college football landscape nowadays. You need some dogs that have heart, that refuse to be beat, and just have a superior will over their opponent. And at times we haven't had that. We need to get back to it.
I think just watching this game, I think we saw a lot of that for a lot of the game, right? We saw it. The team looked like they were playing more free, like they were playing a little bit looser, and they had that kind of will to it. But also you still see those stretches during a game where, like, I think Ryan Day called a fantastic game. I think he did everything that he could to get there. But then I go back and I look and see, okay, the leading rusher in the game was Dallin Hayden, right? Who had 9 carries. So there was one running back that had 9 carries. And then you had Mayan Williams had 3, you had Emeka Egbuka had 2, and you had Xavier Johnson had 6, I think, or something. And CJ had 12, some of those obviously being scrambles, exiting the pocket, what have you. But like there was almost virtually zero run game. And you would then find stretches during the game where Ohio State can take over if we just put together a drive. And you have, I think it was in the first half, you had 2 series back to back for Ohio State that netted -2 yards on 6 plays and 2 punts. Georgia scores 2 touchdowns between those, I think it was, or a touchdown and a field goal. And now all of a sudden it's 24-21 Georgia instead of, 28-14 or whatever it would have been. And it's like those are the moments where I still see just we lack. And like you look at all the key plays of what was it? Tommy Eichenberg getting stuck in coverage and like just getting absolutely beat in shades of tough Borland against Smith in the national championship game against Alabama, but not as bad. He at least stuck with him a little bit. The Mitch Rossi 4th down penalty, the fake field goal timeout, you look at all those key plays and it's like, yeah, a lot of those, in my opinion, if one goes our way, is it a different game? Probably. But then I also look at all of those stretches during the game that we had everything within our grasp to just take over. And Georgia made the bigger plays. They were able to get a 12-yard sack on CJ Stroud to force 3rd and 17, I think it was. And like if it's 3rd and 5, that's a totally different play call. And I don't know, there's just a lot of those moments like you said where you still see, the dogs, for lack of a better term, being that we played Georgia, but come out and just do what they need to do. And you see Ohio State players, Lathan Ransom, falling down on a play, getting beat in coverage or whatever it is, just not getting to Stetson Bennett in time. I don't know, there's just a lot that I think little things throughout the game that if Ohio State does differently or just has that little bit of an edge, then we take that step. I don't know if that's a Ryan Day. I think Jim Knowles is the right guy, at least for now. Give him at least another year to turn around the defense. But, if we still see a lot of the same issues next year, I don't know what you do defensively, because that's obviously been the biggest, criticism during Ryan Day's tenure is this is not the same defense that we had up until 2019.
Yeah, I think I've really been happy. Most of us have all been pretty happy with what we've seen from Jim Knowles. We know that he's a high caliber DC. He's got some creative ideas. The players seem to really rally around him and listen, and it's effective. And his leadership is working there. Getting one stop against Georgia, the reigning national champion, the number 1 team in the country, is easier said than done. Mm-hmm. Although I mentioned, hey, in the 4th quarter, it's what you got to do if you want to take that next step that you talked about, a dynasty type program. When you some of the issues we had that you talked about with Kerry Coombs and a tough Borland trying to cover down on one of the best receivers in the country. It's just there's some issues there, man, and you have to you've got to figure out in your recruiting cycle what players fit your mold or what players fit your system. So for Jim Knowles being his first year, I think we definitely have to give him that solid 3, maybe 5 years. Mm. Because there's guys that are going to come in that are going to be more of what he wants. I'm interested. A guy that we talked about on the show a couple weeks back, had a chance to see him and call his game. Arvell Reese
Oh, yeah.
from up there at Cleveland Glenville. That, Jim Knowles was in the house to watch him personally. This is his type of guy. So let's get his type of dudes in the building, in his room, and let's see how it all shakes out from there. Because I truly believe that we have the right guy. As much as I've criticized the offensive line this year, Coach Fry, I don't know. There's just things that you that when you come into a new program, when you're the new guy, curve, and I think all of those coaches may have felt that this year, and maybe getting over that learning curve is what we need to be able to cover that hurdle.
Yeah, and you touched on it just then with Fry, but I guess kind of looking at, all right, where do we go from here? Like, what happens in this off season, right? I think obviously the biggest one that came out was Ryan Day, mulling at least the idea of giving up play calling duties to either a Justin Fry or a Brian Hartline. Fry obviously has more experience in that arena. I think Ohio State fans are more kind of in line with also doing whatever we can to keep Brian Hartline on staff. I don't know that we need to do all that much, to be honest. It just, I think it's more keeping the offers off the table from other programs that are, a little bit more enticing. But as long as, something doesn't open up that is, like I said, more enticing for Brian Hartline, he wants to be at Ohio State, so he's going to stay at Ohio State. I don't know that you need to give him the world necessarily to just keep him from exploring any and all options, right? So I like Fry. I think he's done a great job with the offensive line. I mean, at least keeping it, on par with what it was last year. I'll be curious to see what he does, after I think, nothing has been set in stone yet, but we all assume that we're losing, Paris Johnson, that we're going to lose DeJuan Jones, could lose Luke Whippler. So what happens across that offensive line next year will be one thing I think is super important to watch, just knowing what the depth looks like in that room. I'm curious to see secondary. We just got Jihad Carter, I think it is, from Syracuse, the stud safety. So see how he fits into Knowles. But I agree, Knowles has the history, looking back at Oklahoma State, looking back at Duke, of turning those defensive units around in a few years to be top 5, top 15 defenses. And there's no reason he's not going to be able to do that at Ohio State. But, he does have to get the guys that fit his scheme, the guys that are going to, be able to play the way that he needs them to play. And now having a full off season to kind of build some of those same guys up, like a Tommy Eichenberg, potentially, if he comes back, which I don't know that he will, but that would be a huge keep if he does. But I think Steel Chambers has already said he's coming back. Lathan Ransom could come back. So those guys that have made some strides this past year, just in 1 year under his system, I'll be curious to see how big of an impact they're able to make next year. And hopefully you get the Denzel Burke from a year ago as opposed to this year. Hopefully we get a healthier cornerback room, or we can get somebody in the transfer portal. But there's a lot of question marks around it. I don't know. I think there's a ton of talent on this team, and I have very high hopes for what 2023 has, but there's more questions, I think, the more that I actually look at this team and see what's coming back and what happened in this game, and do we have what it takes to, get back into that playoff conversation and, potentially win a championship. Hopefully Alabama's down again, I would say.
I think one of the things we've lost in the recruiting process at times is being so hung up on 5 stars, 4 stars, where you rank in the top 100 or the ESPN top 300. I talked about this on one of those live shows with our guy, Kirk Barton, the Scoop CEO. He was a 2-star coming out of Perry High School. and he ended up being a captain and All-American. He has a tree in Buckeye Grove.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we need to, and this is also, again, easier said than done. And this really puts a lot of pressure on each individual coach when they go out into their recruiting territories, but recruiting attitude more than the actual stars. Most guys that end up playing in Power 5 schools, you should have been dominating your competition in high school. So how do we really know how you're going to transition or pan out at the collegiate level when you're going against premier talent every week? So to really kind of get ecology, that the mindset of these young kids that you're recruiting is not an easy thing to do. But after sitting with somebody for a couple conversations, going to their house, being around their parents or whoever it may be, their guardians, you're gonna have a pretty good beat on these guys, rather than just say, hey, look what you can. I truly believe now, as you mentioned, the safety from Syracuse, and then we have the other two offensive linemen that are coming in. One of them being from, I believe, Tulsa. The portal is where you can really build that depth and have guys that are ready to go day one when they step on campus. Because you and I both know, Ryan, from as much Buckeye football as we've seen, there are not a whole lot of 18-year-olds that are ready to go day one when they step on campus. I saw a handful of them. Maurice Claret, Ted Ginn Jr. It was a rarity to see somebody across the offensive line, but Rob Sims ended up starting the 2002 national championship game. So that's just a small handful. And I also saw a ton of guys who were parade All-Americans, who were 5 stars, who were 4 stars, that never saw the field their entire time there.
Yeah. I mean, we almost saw it with Julian Fleming, with just injury ridden. And, I think he played really great at times. So I'll be curious to see if he comes back. I think he would benefit from it. But like you said, kind of finding the right character guys to bring into the program. Like, I would much rather have, that than just go and, pull like a Texas A&M, get every 5-star you can, and then have 27 transfer portal, opt-outs basically the very next year, right? Like, that's just, I mean, if we think it's an Ohio State problem, like, look at the number of just exits from other teams throughout college football. Like, are we necessarily landing guys in the portal? No, but like, honestly, if they're in the portal, sometimes it's because they're getting beat. So like, do you want that person on your team? I want the guys that are, trying to compete for national championship and go somewhere that they can, from maybe a smaller school that they weren't able to do that, but they were starters, right? And they were elite. So I agree. Like, you don't know what you're going to get from a high school kid coming into college, because yeah, they should, if they're getting recruited to the D1 level, they should be, at least good enough to play. But you might have those guys that have that dog in them. Like, I personally think Devin Brown will be the starter next year, just because I think he has a little bit more of an edge to him than Kyle McCord has. I think Kyle McCord is great, and I think he should and probably will get the first crack at it. But I think both can easily win this job, and I just think I don't know. I think something about Devin Brown just tells me he can win this pretty well. So I don't know. That's my prediction for 2023, I guess. But you also look at guys like Brandon Inniss and Carnell Tate. Granted, it's Brian Hartline, so you kind of expect he's just going to land whoever he wants anyways, right? But all the NIL stuff that comes out about, Brandon Inniss turned down all of this money to play for Brian Hartline because he saw what Brian Hartline has done in the years that he's been at Ohio State, and turning guys into NFL caliber talent. And he wants that. And Carnell Tate wants that. And all these guys are playing for Ohio State that want that. And I'd rather that than, have guys coming in like an Eli Ricks that is going to transfer, multiple different times and then take a shot at the NFL just because he was a 5-star, right? Like that's not the kids I want. And I think Ryan Day has done a tremendous job so far in his tenure of keeping those guys on the roster. Guys like Cameron Babb, guys like Julian Fleming, like keeping them in the room and keeping them on this team versus going out and trying to find like the newest flavor that might come in and negatively impact that room.
Coach Tressel thought he had his work cut out for him just putting that fence up around the state of Ohio. This landscape now that coaches have to navigate. I mean, I don't know how they do it. You have to have an extraordinary support staff. Your recruiting coordinator, your director of player personnel and football operations. I mean, there's such a premium on those guys as well now, where in days past you could almost plug and play. Somebody, hey, you're basically just lining up airfare and destination and where we're lodging at and food and all that. I mean, it's so much more complex nowadays. And I think there really is a lot of stuff that those coaches have to weed through. As you mentioned, is this guy in the portal because he just got beat out and now he's leaving because he's avoiding competition? Is that really what I want on my team? Or as you look at what Deion Sanders is doing out there in Colorado, and he's like, screw it, I'm probably not going to bring in anybody from high school. I'm just going straight portal.
He's just going straight to Jackson State and just pulling every player he wants from Jackson State.
Yeah, it's not easy. It's not easy to navigate, but I know that Coach Day with his I guess you could call it fullness. I mean, he's still very young. He's a creative quarterback type mind. I know from conversations that I've had with Coach Tressel how passionate Ryan Day is. I mean, daily phone calls that he would get from him and just the questions, and he's constantly looking for different pieces of advice. And he doesn't want a guy that, gets beat because he left one stone unturned, so the preparation is there. The game plan is there. The analysis is there, but now it just comes down to, can you execute on the field? And we have lacked that, obviously in the 2 Michigan games, the previous 2 years. And now here getting exited from, from this game. And think too, we very easily could have got beat in that Rose Bowl game. Very easily could have got beat by Utah.
I was at a wedding for that game and just like watching it on my phone as much as I could, and just like, oh, man, I was about to lose my mind every time that we would score and they would just score again to go back up by 2. I was like, oh my God, just like, do not do this to me today.
Yeah, it's tough, man. But I just continuously will say, there's so many great football players out there. There's so much great talent across the country that I think we, with what TCU has done now, we are starting to see the parity that, there's great players out there that maybe they're late bloomers. Maybe they just needed an opportunity. Maybe they came from a small school, but they're a premier talent.
Yep.
I think we're starting to find that out. That teams that you thought, oh man, we're going to walk all over this squad. Look at Tulane beating USC. I mean, there's a lot of different key points you can look at as to say why this team is successful or that team is successful. It's always going to start with great coaching, but coaches finding a way to put their players and their talent in the best possible positions to win is always what it's going to come down to. And then those players have to execute the game plan.
We talk about it too with the NFL and like guys getting drafted into the right team and the right fit. And like, are guys successful in the NFL because they went to the right fit, or are they less successful because they, got put into a position that wasn't good for them? Like Justin Fields obviously has had a great year this year, but it's not an ideal situation for him. So does he continue to, progress as an NFL quarterback in Chicago if it's not the right situation for him compared to, you know, uh, I don't know, a Justin Herbert, that's done really well with the Chargers, right? Like, I think we look at it for the NFL, but we don't even really consider that much in college. But it is true, like you said, guys that are transferring, like, are you getting beat, or is it maybe it just wasn't the right scheme, it wasn't the right fit, it wasn't the right coach to get the most out of you, and then you go somewhere and you find that right fit and you find that right guy that can actually progress your career in the way that it needs to. I think that's something that gets missed a lot, is it's like, maybe it's just not the right guy for you. Like, if you can't just have the right communication with that player to get them to perform the way that they need to, and it's not for anything of a lack of effort, a lack of ability for a coach or for a player. It's just, you got to kind of be put in the right position as well, and there's some luck that has to go into that as well. And I'll be curious to see too, if Ryan Day does give up play calling, I'll be curious to see kind of how this team changes, not structurally or anything like that, but just with him being able to focus more just on kind of like the team management and overarching kind of themes over the entirety of the team, as opposed to more so on the offense. I'll be curious to kind of see how it evolves from there, and how, I guess, what this team is able to kind of do in terms of taking that next step.
And let's not forget too how many times coaches are leaving, they're fired,
Yep.
they're taking another job, and now all of a sudden you're sitting there, and the next guy that comes in just, yeah, like you said, might not be your cup of tea. I mean, there's a lot of rumors swirling around that Harbaugh might be leaving Michigan to take an NFL job. How many of those Michigan guys might jump ship? How many of those guys, I believe he's pilfered a couple casts from Stanford?
Mm-hmm.
Like how many of those dudes are going to say, I don't know if I want to go now? I mean, it changes so much. It's like, it's like changing your underwear, man. I mean, like, coaches are here one day, they're gone the next. And,
Yeah.
I always have a little bit of an issue with it, because I know that there is the standard and the expectation to win is always there. Sometimes you just got to give guys a little bit of time. To give somebody
Mm-hmm.
2 or 3 years just isn't enough, depending on what you were coming from in the first place.
Yeah.
2 to 3 years coming off the back of Urban Meyer's program is probably enough time to figure
Yeah.
out where you're at. Coming off the back of somebody who had a program that was going 500 every year, you got to get 4, 5, 6 years to be able to implement some stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. No, 100%. And, I think the good thing is, for teams like Ohio State, for teams like Alabama, the programs that are always in that conversation, right? Like, you can kind of get by pretty well for a couple years while some of that gets worked out. So while, like, a Jim Knowles comes in and does what he can to turn around the defense, it might not be pretty. We might not like watching that transition for 2 years, 3 years, but Ryan Day and the offense can, at least, they're going to win games. It's not like all of a sudden, because the defense is struggling, that Ohio State's going to lose 4-5 games a year. Like, that's just not going to happen. The offense is good enough to win a lot of close games, and can, especially in the Big Ten, continue to be in that conversation as one of the best teams in the country. And then you have that time frame to allow Jim Knowles to work what he can, get his guys in there, and then now all of a sudden, 3 years from implementation, you've got a more elite team that has that dynastic kind of capabilities potentially. In 2023, potentially could be that year. Schedule wise, at Indiana, Youngstown State, Western Kentucky, at Notre Dame. That would be, at Notre Dame kind of worries me a little bit, just because it's going to be whoever starts at quarterback. It's going to be their first true road game. Because Indiana, I don't count that. But first true road game for them, and we'll see, what Notre Dame's able to do in Marcus Freeman's second year, and see if they can turn a corner and kind of get back into what they were. At Wisconsin later in the year always worries me, just because I feel like we never play well in Camp Randall, so I don't know what to expect there, but I don't necessarily think Wisconsin's going to be ready under Fickell's first year to compete. But I think give him a couple years, kind of like we just talked about with Knowles, and Wisconsin will be right there.
Fick will have those boys ready, and I think one of the big galvanizing points for this Ohio State team in this offseason is going to be when Coach Mick gets them together in February. You start doing your 5 a.m., 6 a.m. conditioning deals, that team bonding, preparing yourself for spring ball. There needs to be a togetherness like there never has been before, because there's a lot of talk, and it's come from myself, about the attitude, the toughness, the heart of some of these guys, not just on the offensive line, but across the board. Build that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You build that stuff when you're doing board gassers, Woody Hayes at 5, 6 in the morning, when you're doing ROTC drills, when you're doing mile runs, and you're doing cut 300s, and all of different things you do to build up your endurance, your conditioning, but really it's to bring you together as a team. This group needs to be together, and they need to reestablish an identity of being tough. And we made the joke about dogs, for the Bulldogs, but they need to develop the attitude of a dog, and that's what that's what guys like Mike Doss do for his group. That's what I saw guys like Troy Smith do for his group.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I need to see some of these guys do for this group here. You need to establish the identity of, we're going to walk into your house. We're going to walk in there to Notre Dame. And we're going to smack you in the mouth. We're not going to leave it in the officials' hands to make a call or not make a call, because we're going to kick your ass from the start of the game to the finish.
Yeah, sorry about my dogs in the background.
Hey, cue the dogs, man. They must have heard me.
Right. But yeah, no, I agree. And I think there's a lot to take away from this game that is positive, that there's a lot of that in the room. I'll be curious to see kind of like who those vocal leaders are, because that is one thing that I don't think we really had this year, was the vocal person that is very outspoken in that way, right? And says those things. And I'll be curious to see if we have that and who that is, that's taking that kind of role over and making this team, just that little bit extra, that little bit more. I will say, I think Ohio State's back in the college football playoff next year. I don't see, outside of those that I mentioned and outside of at Michigan, obviously, I don't see a ton on the schedule that worries me from a, loss standpoint, or somebody that can kind of play spoiler in that way. I don't see Ryan Day losing 3 in a row to Michigan. So I think that I'm not terribly worried. I'm going to call it right now. Ohio State's winning by double digits next year. That's what I meant in that video, right? It was next year, not this year. So
those are the 2023 truths right there.
Exactly. So Ohio State gets in Big Ten championship. I don't really think it matters who plays there. I think, any 3 of Wisconsin, Minnesota, honestly, I think Nebraska could make a push. I think they've been really close in a lot of games. They just can't kind of get over that little hump to win in the fourth quarter. They give up leads, etc. I think Matt Rule can kind of turn that around. So I don't know what they're barking at right now, but they're losing
it. You've got the number 1 quarterback recruit in the country that you just pulled away from us.
Yeah. So theoretically, he hasn't gone yet, but but yeah, I think whoever they play in the Big Ten championship game, I don't know that it really makes a big difference, because the West is terrible. And then my final 4, in no particular order, for the college football playoff: Ohio State, Alabama, Oregon, Georgia. Thoughts?
I like it. I like right where you're at. I think, boy, it's going to be interesting to me how this national championship game shakes out on Monday, and what this does for TCU's program. I want to see the small guy, get another sniff at this thing, man. So I'm looking for that next group that's going to step up to the challenge, like Cincinnati did last year. When they lost to Bama, it was a stepping stone for an underdog to get in there. Now TCU's got a chance after beating Michigan to play Georgia. Let the chips fall where they may. Let's see if we can't get another one of these guys in here to prove why we needed a college football playoff in the first place.
Yeah, I don't know how you don't root for Max Duggan either. He's just like as unlikable as Stetson Bennett is to me. Max Duggan is like the complete opposite. And I just, I'm not one of those people that, I want to have lost to the national champion. Like, I don't care about that. I want to see TCU just, taken behind the woodshed. Right. They won't, but that's what I want to see. But yeah, I don't know. I think next year there's a lot more parity, at least it seems, especially this year, in college football. So I'll be curious to see kind of like who separates. I think, like I said, Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia. I mean, I don't see enough being lost in the off season to make me think that those teams aren't going to be right there again. I think Alabama obviously had a down year, but it's Alabama. As long as Nick Saban's there, I'm not going to count him out. So I think they'll be back and ready to go. And then, yeah, I'm curious to see kind of who that kind of, not that Oregon's a little guy, right? But who the little guy is in next year, and who can kind of make that push to see the final year of the 4-team playoff before we get to the 12-team and before we start seeing a lot more of those little guys competing, and we start to see a little bit more of that. Maybe a Tulane, maybe, who knows?
It'll be exciting. That's why we did this. That's why it's going to be exciting, because it's more inclusive, and you're going to get the opportunity to see, like you just mentioned, Tulane. I mean, who expected them to go out there and get them? That was those things right there. TCU beating Michigan. Mm. You look back through history. We talked about Boise State beating Oklahoma. This is why you give these guys a chance, because they deserve. If you won your conference, you deserve to get a shot at it. If you go on, deserve to get a shot at it. Yeah,
I agree. I'm excited for the expanded. Although it's going to be weird with seating and everything, but yeah, it's going to be good. It's going to be good. A lot of good games to come for sure. But that is going to do it for us here today on the Morning Scoop. I know it's a little bit longer edition. Spent a lot of time going through our own therapy with painful moments of Saturday's game, but it's a much needed cleanse, and we get ready for the national championship game. Just kind of see what shakes out there and start looking ahead to 2023. And with Ohio State fandom and everything at Buckeye Scoop, I'm sure you won't be surprised by noticing that the conversation will start essentially right now about what happens in 2023, who wins the quarterback battle. We're going to start getting some more content about this coming year and what's to come, but always exciting stuff at Buckeye Scoop. So like I said at the top of the show, be sure to check out buckeyescoop.com. Join today. So that you have access to the Ask the Insiders board, and you can have access to the community and all the conversations happening as we get ready for the offseason and, another national championship run. We're going to do it. It's going to happen.
I feel like I can be reintegrated back to society now.
I know, right? The good thing is I don't have to go to Cancun with a Michigan fan that is playing in the national championship. So that was at least promising. If there is one caveat to take away, or one positive to take away from Saturday, it's that Michigan also lost. So always a good day when that happens. But TJ, appreciate you jumping on. Appreciate the conversation and everything as always. Looking forward to talking again soon.
All right, Scoop Nation, I'm out, man.